and then one time we borrow it for a show, it's going to crap out on us. And it's just sort of the nature of it, but I think if you embrace that, if it becomes a part of your sort of world, it can also be kind of a fun. I'm very excited by fragile theater. I mean, that's part of what Counterpulse is kind of great. It's intimate, but there's also things that go on here that are not like highly produced, highly rehearsed, where you never feel like somebody might like screw something up. I really like it. I like theater where I never know for sure if you're going to get from the beginning to the end. And I think that's a lot of our work does that. I mean, to us. And
we've always felt like our work is like quote unquote low tech often, and we often reveal the technology, like showing the computer, the string pulling, or just because it's a fragility, we're like, well, we're doing this, and this has a little thing, and I'm pressing the space bar, and that's making that go, and so that it can be revealed, so that if it does break down, that we have kind of an avenue out or something.
Can I just add something to that question? Just a little observation. That myth building is also really important to this kind of work. You might remember Susan Cozell, telematic dreaming is something I think a lot of us have heard of. It's one of those touchstone performances, and it never works, right? I mean, I don't know, has anybody actually seen it in this room? Okay, I mean, I know it occasionally has worked, but most of the time when she performed it, it just completely crapped out. It would never even start up, but it becomes its own myth. I think that's really interesting, that some of the work is beautiful in just not being there. And there's something really interesting about the liveness of performance in that, too.
And I'll just talk to the other side of it for a second. If you don't want it to crap out, try and work with it for a really long time and maybe own it and like create a long-term relationship.
I think also when you do that, then you also have the ability to, like Sheldon and Lisa were talking about, it's inevitable if you do this stuff that it's going to go wrong, and that it's going to go wrong when you most need it to go right, or that kind of thing. And I think that's also, it's like he's saying, I feel the same way. It comes back to the beauty of live performance and being in that moment where you have to improvise and you have to make sense of that moment. And the truth is, that's part of what we love about live theater, is that can happen even in a no-tech show. Something can go wrong. The fire alarm can go off, or someone can hurt themselves, or somebody forgets their lines, or, and it's actually what you do in that moment that's so interesting. And I was actually, as part of this, part of the project I'm working on right now, and also as part of this conversation we were having the other night, I've just been thinking about some of my favorite and most memorable moments in live theater as a performer and an audience member. And I was kind of shocked and appalled to realize that my list actually largely consisted of moments when things went terribly wrong in live performance, or things happened that weren't supposed to. And something really interesting happened in that moment because it broke the moment of the illusion. And it brought us back to the reality of like being in this room live, and that liveness is spontaneous and impulsive and unpredictable, and you could be dead in a moment. And so I think that's actually, you have to embrace that. You have to be ready to embrace that as an artist and performer if you're going to rely on this kind of stuff.
I also want to say too that mistakes we've made is to think that the technology itself, because it has all these things already collected into it, is somehow doesn't require any labor. That you need to like create the collective again around all of this to support your ideas, so that you need to take care of how cables are working, and that there's a labor involved. That they aren't just easier. That it just takes just as much care to deal with that as it is to focus lights and various things to get yourself in the support of people.
We have a microphone back there.
Hi. I had a question basically for everybody. Given that this media is proliferating everywhere in cities like San Francisco, we have a lot of sophisticated people who are in your audiences already doing film and editing and sometimes really sophisticated stuff, just at a craftsmanship level. How does it affect your process when you think about your audiences, given that it's a language, it's a part of your vocabulary now? How does that affect how you work and how you construct I mean, what are you trying to say? If we may speak, a few of us maybe in the audience might speak maybe this language more sophisticated ways than you do, perhaps. How do you think about that in your process as you're developing pieces?
Yeah, I mean, for me, I know I just have to pick my point of entry. It's like, I'm not a very good film editor. I'm not, I mean, I have a whole long list of things I'm not, but so, and there are probably a bunch of people who are better than that, like you said, watching. And so, that's not the point, though, is to necessarily be a good film editor. Like, that guy's working on whatever, you know what I mean, or girl is working on whatever. And so, yeah, it's about driving the point of what I'm trying to do, which is kind of a cop-out answer, but it's like, it doesn't all have to line up necessarily to be virtuosic in its thing. Like, I'm not a really sick, scratch DJ, VJ guy, you know what I mean? But just the idea of that thing is able to push the point.
That's kind of what I mean. I'm recognizing that's not your aim, and
Yeah.
I realize that. I mean, you're dancers, performance artists, so knowing that, how do you go about it? How does it make you think, or how does it affect how you think?
I think that's a question that I ask myself all the time, and for me it comes back to the penis envy technology thing, that like I know what I can't match or what I can't equal or compete against. Like, there's a reason that I'm like, I know you could be at home watching HD TV tonight instead of coming and seeing me. So what is it about coming and seeing me that I can do that your TV can't? And I'm not saying, that's just a question that I try to ask myself, because otherwise I don't think live performance, otherwise it's like, well, is live performance obsolete? It really comes back to that question. And I think it's the high-tech, low-tech thing that we all talk about a lot, that sometimes I feel like it's more and more interesting to not use the most cutting edge of technology and to not use the most high-tech stuff in theater, because you're calling attention back to actually what our relationship to actually the most rudimentary tech is, because we're so overwhelmed and inundated now with like the most amazing uses of technology.
I also want to say, I think that part of the things that we do too, or I should say that what we do for sure is deconstruct, come at it from a postmodern perspective, where we're not going to go for the most pure and deep film, that's like in its own kind of thing that it is. So we can deconstruct it or take it apart or bring some more critical kind of approaches, or just make people think maybe differently about images in general, or things like that, or how we collect information or ideas. So it's not so much about the depth with which the craft is going. It's more about the interventions and looking and the pulling apart and unpacking the ideas around what's there. And hopefully someone who makes film or something might go, okay, that's flashback, or they're doing a collecting, a montaging here. It might not be like a flashy montage, but still it's a thing that they're commenting upon that I can kind of relate to.
So, one more, yeah?
I just wanted to say I have to leave really soon, but I want to say something right before I go, because I have to go DJ, and he wants to do something too, because we're together. I was a study with Sarah, and I use video, but for my last show I didn't, because I was like, I just need to have a show where I don't use video, and it's about the Old West, and that'd be weird. I don't know. And so it was much less stressful than any other show I've ever done in my life, because every other show I've done was video, and video is really stressful. But the thing I think about video that's interesting with people, rather than me watching my TV at home, like, here I'm at home and I'm watching HGTV, or I'm out with my Mac, is that if you're watching it from the audience and you see a real person next to the image, the TV image is always dead, and it's always a ghost of a thing that happened before. And so I often use it in my own work with like puppets or shadow puppets to deal with memory. And so I think that the real person next to us, it causes us to have like a weird mood in our mind where we're forced to negotiate the difference between